Okay, 10-6 is completing the square. Completing the square is one of our harder topics that we're going to learn all year. So just stick with me. If you don't get it the first time, I'll explain it again. Okay, now first of all, on this one, we do the opposite of what we've been doing. We actually need this 32 on the other side. Okay, so we're going to make this x squared minus 20x equals negative 32. And we do this on ones that can't be factored, or that we don't, or that seem hard to factor. So what times what equals 32 added together gives us 20? I really don't know, so that's what we're going to use this. Okay, so what you do with this is you take this number right here, the number in front of the x, and you divide by 2. So 20 divided by 2 is 10, and then you square it, and it's 100. Okay, so you divide by 2 and then square it. So what you're going to do with that 100 is we have x squared minus 20x, then we're going to add 100. And on the other side, we're also going to add 100. Okay, so now, so you take that, you divide it, and then you square it, and you add it to both sides. Okay, so over here, so 100 minus 32 is going to give us 68 on this side. And over here we have x squared minus 20x plus 100. Okay, and so when we do that, if you look at this left side, you, hold on just a, okay, so I had to check for something real quick. On this left side, we can factor this now. What times what equals 100 added to x minus 10, x times x minus 10 equals 68. Okay, what this number is always going to be is whatever you divided by here. When you did 20 divided by 2 and got 10, it's always going to be that 10. So it's really x minus 10 squared equals 68. Okay, so we're not quite done yet. Okay, so what we have to do here is to get rid of this squared. Remember, we take the square root. Okay, so this is going to give us x minus 10 equals plus or minus the square root of 68. Now, we don't know what the square root of 68 is because it's not a perfect square. So we have to make sure I'm not... Right, I'm making sure I'm doing that right. Okay, so if you want to, you can take, or not if you want to, but what you need to do is you need to take the square root of 68. When you get into algebra 2, you'll just leave it as a square root, but right now, so we're going to make this x minus 10 equals 8 let's make it 25. Let's round to the hundredths right there. So now, but remember it's plus or minus still. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to, so this splits it up into 2. It's x minus 10 equals 8.25 and x minus 10 equals negative 8.25. And then we just solve it. We add 10. So x equals 18.25. And then we add 10. I'm sorry. Yeah, we still add 10, but this is a negative over here. Okay, so 10 minus 8.25 is 1.75 equals x. Okay, so as you can tell, there's no way we could have factored this and gotten these two numbers. Okay, but still, it's okay that they're decimals. It's just that's where the parabola crosses the x-axis. It's not at a perfect number. It's not at an integer. It's at a decimal. It's at a rational or irrational number, depending on where you round. Okay, so we're going to do a few more examples because I know that's a lot to think about. Okay, and unfortunately, it's not always a nice, neat number like 100. Okay, so here we're going to subtract our 3. So we have x squared plus 5x equals negative 3. And again, we take this number right here. 5 divided by 2, which is just 5, just leave it like that. Do not make it into a decimal. Squared, okay, which is 25 over 4. And leave it like that. Okay, so then we have x squared plus 5x plus 25 over 4 equals negative 3 plus 25 over 4. Okay, so remember, this is always going to end up being x plus whatever we had over here, the 5 halves. 5 halves, x plus 5 halves, and if you FOIL that out, you should get this right here. Equals, well, negative 3, and you can put this in your calculator if you want. Negative 3 plus 25 over 4 equals 3 1/4, okay, or 3.25. You might want to leave it. So this is going to become x plus 5 halves squared. I would leave this as, what is that, 13 over 4? 3 and 4 is 12. 13. Yeah, I would just leave it like that. Then we have to take the square root. Remember, let me change my color here. Okay, so then it becomes x plus 5 halves equals plus or minus the square root of 13/4, which is not a nice, neat number, but that's okay because we're going to use our calculator. Okay, so the square root of 13 divided by 4 is 1.8. Okay, so it becomes x plus 5 halves equals 1.8, because remember this is plus or minus 8. And x plus 5 halves equals negative 1.8. Okay, and then we solve. Divide our minus 5 halves, minus 5 halves. Again, just use your calculator. 1.8 minus 5 halves equals negative 0.7 is 1. Subtract 5 halves, subtract 5 halves. So negative 1.8 minus 5 halves is equal to negative 4.3. So those are our 2 points. Those are where the parabola would cross the x-axis. Okay, again, I know it's a lot. You just got to remember step by step. Just use your notes when you're doing the assignment. Okay. So on this last one, again, we're going to subtract 16. So we're left with x squared minus 14x equals negative 16. Okay. This right here, you don't have to worry about the negative right now. Okay, so we're going to do 14 divided by 2 is 7, and then we take that squared to get 49. Okay, that hence completing the square. Okay, so we have x squared minus 14x plus 49 equals negative 16 plus 49. Okay, so again, this is going to end up being x minus 7, x minus 7 equals 49 minus 16 is 33. So of course it's not a perfect square, but that's okay. So x minus 7 squared equals 33. And then we take the square root to get rid of that squared, plus or minus the square root of 33. Well, the square root of 33 is plus or minus 5.74. Okay, so we have x minus 7 equals 5.74, and we have x minus 7 equals negative 5.74. We add 7 to both. So 5.74 plus 7, you just need to add 7. So x equals 12.74. And then over here you add 7. Okay, so 7 minus 5.74 really, or negative, however you want to look at it. Negative 5.74 plus 7 is 1.26. So these are our two x's. This is where it would cross the x-axis. Okay, so since they're not nice, neat numbers, you can use completing the square.